Austin. How you doing, bud?
Good, Dad. How are you?
I'm good. I'm excited to have our guest on today, and our journey is gonna take us inside the heart and mind of tragedy and triumph. A father's tragic football collision and his daughter's triumphant fight for women's sports. From the gridiron to the pool, sports can shape our lives and our history. This is a story of compassion, courage, healing of the heart, and a fight for common sense. My name is Ken Karcher, and alongside me is my son Austin. Today, we'd like to welcome Team Gaines as our guest to Awaken Kingdom Culture, where hearts and minds come alive, one story at a time. Welcome, Brad and Riley.
Well, thank you. It's a joy to be on with you guys. Another father-child duo. So this is exciting.
Yeah, we like to do that. But well, let's just jump right in. And this really is a question for both of you. Brad, we can start with you. Tell us a little bit about your family growing up and some of the relationships you had, siblings, and then Riley, just you can give it from your perspective, your family.
Coach, first of all, I was fortunate to be raised by two tremendous parents that brought us up in the church, tried to teach us the right way. Of course, five boys in the family, there's always roadblocks. So been over a few of those speed bumps, but I'm a firm believer that if you're brought up in that way and you have great leadership, and it doesn't have to be your parents, it can be anything else. You receive leadership on the athletic teams that you grow up playing different. When you have that person that sets an example, it's truly beneficial. So my family, of course, as I said, all brothers. My father had boys and a tremendous athletic background, I guess, Ken. My oldest brother, my father played professional baseball, played football at Murray. My oldest brother, we lost an older brother when he was 5 years old in a terrible, tragic car accident. Our next brother, Greg, was a linebacker, played college at Tennessee, and then played 10 years at Seattle. I'm sure you played against him when you were in Denver and some of your other stops. Chris, who would be your age, he graduated in 87. He was a Kodak All-American linebacker as well. And he played at Miami, Tampa, Arizona, a couple other places. And then brother Jeff, who was a tremendous athlete and just didn't want to go to school. And that wasn't that wasn't the path that he chose. And then myself, I was a running back at Vanderbilt, and then played in Canada and was at Philadelphia for a minute. And, just come from a background of a bunch of rockheads, Ken, a lot of bangs and a lot of surgeries, but you wouldn't trade it for nothing, right?
No, that's for sure. So Riley, growing up with your in your home, plus with all your uncles, tell us a little bit about your upbringing.
Well, unlike my dad, I had almost all sisters and one brother. But what a blessing it is my dad mentioned having two great parents. Of course, I'm the same way. So it was never a matter of what sport we played, but we were always in a sport. My oldest sister, she did basketball, volleyball, softball, went to Ole Miss. I swam, played softball up through high school. Younger brother, he's in college. He played football. Youngest sister, she's an elite level gymnast. So it's kind of a blessing we all did different sports, because I think each of us is so competitive. I can't imagine us all playing the same sport and how that would go. I think now it would be looked at as child abuse in today's world for your parents to make you play a sport. But I am so grateful that my parents really did. And like my dad said, you see how the skill sets you learn and develop in your sport, you see how that transcends beyond just your athletic career and the achievements that you have.
Ken, I'm going to interject something here. And I think what you see in today's society is you can go down to the local ball field, baseball field, wherever in Georgia or wherever it is. And you see those parents, it can be 7 years, the kids are 7 years old, and you have parents out there and they're screaming at their kids and they're treating them, and they think that they're the New York Yankees and they're 7, 8 years old. I made it a point for my kids, and that it's how my dad was. He never stressed, hey, you got to do this and this, because and my kids, I could care less. I always made sure that they knew, hey, don't do this because of what I did or what I accomplished or what my uncle or what her uncles did. I'm not that guy. If you don't want to play this or that, if you want to play the tuba in the band, do it. I'm not that guy, because you can go down to that ball field and the parents screaming at the kids, and that guy's never put a jock strap on in his life.
We don't have jock straps anymore, Brad.
Yeah, really. So I want to be clear that they've done. I'm tremendously proud of all my kids and what they've accomplished, and it's because they've wanted to do it.
Yeah. Now, Riley, how did you get started in swimming, and what did you like about it?
Yeah, so kind of just your typical summer swim thing that a lot of kids do, right? So me and my older sister, we were a part of the old Hickory Sharks. That's really where I learned how to swim. And I just had this affinity for it. I think, of course, there was a bit of natural talent. My coach, he pushed me pretty heavily at the time. Being young, you really need to get into year-round swimming, which when you're, 6, 7, whatever it is, and the thought of jumping in a cold pool every single day certainly doesn't sound appealing. But I love the sport really from an early age. So I started doing year-round when I was 8 years old, and of course stuck with it all the way through high school, going on to college. But I think what you might not realize about swimming, I don't think you realize this for the longest time, is just how grueling of a sport it is, how much time goes into it, and the sacrifices you have to make. And
swimming,
I know. It is. You're practicing even in middle school. You go to practice before school, you go to school, straight from school, you go back to practice. That's not including any of the weightlifting or dry land or extra stuff on top of it. And then to balance a social life and all of the other things, school, it's a sport where, you just don't get a lot of time off. You don't get a lot of social time in there. So it's amazing. I look back, I'm like, I can't believe I did it for that long. But of course I wouldn't change it for the world.
Brad, as a dad, what's your favorite memory of Riley swimming, especially growing up? We'll get to the later part in a minute, but and then what was your role as a parent with swimming? Because we know it, like Riley said, it is demanding on the family.
It is, and it has changed so much than when I grew up or when you grew up, that you would run to the ball field for practice, or you'd do this and that. And when I grew up, it was you went from baseball to basketball to football. You just, in every season, boom, boom, boom. When basketball was over, you started baseball. As soon as baseball's over, you're playing football. So now for me, it's kind of disheartening, because I love when you have a good athlete that can play a lot of different sports and it's different movements and different things like that. Now they require you to, if you're going to play baseball, you got to play travel baseball, and that's 8 months, and then he can't play football, and then the football coach is mad at the baseball coach because he don't want him to play, and the basketball coach. So it's so much more geared to one sport now. And even today, so Riley, it was like she said, swim in the morning, swim at night, take her to practice, go to meets, and like our daughter that's a gymnast now, she'll get up at 5 o'clock, which is kind of neat for a 10th grader, that she'll wake up on her own and go exercise with Riley when she's in town, or her mother or her sister. And then right after school, she's going to gym at 3 o'clock, meeting the carpool, and she's back home at 9. And then it's the same thing. It's the next day. But
we've lived that one. One of my two daughters was a level 10 gymnast, so I can relate to that thing.
well, there you go. She's a 9 right now, but she'll be a 10 after this season. So and I tell her that you have opportunities. Everybody has opportunities. It's if you work hard enough to capitalize on what the talent that the Lord's blessed you with. But going to meets when she was young and in high school and in college, it's different. All boys in my immediate family, I'm like, what am I doing in a swimming pool, right? So, and it's watch her swim and then wait for 2 or 3 hours. But I always told her, my advice to her was, hey, look to the left, look to the right. That's who you got, and then fight them. And she has always had that competition in her, which is all I can ask for. Ken, you're a coach. You guys are coaches. You want your guys to fight, to battle. Give me that guy. Give me that guy every time. I want somebody that will jump in the foxhole with me. When I was at Philadelphia, Ray Rhodes, he was the coach then, and he said one time, if I'm in a foxhole and I got one bullet left and the guy in there's not fighting with me, you know where that bullet's going. I want somebody that's on the team with you and that will battle with you. So, that's kind of neat. And you guys understand that as coaches.
Absolutely. So either one of you can answer this first, but what role did faith play in y'all's home?
I mean, even still, of course, it's central in my life and everything that I do. And like my dad said about his family, his parents, look, we were raised in the church too. So me and my siblings, it was church every Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, which is a bit of a drag when you're the youngest one in the congregation by at least 70 years. The amount of visitor cards that we would write on in the back of the pews and play tic-tac-toe or hangman or connect the dots or whatever we could possibly play to I guess distract us, when you're young, is certainly ungodly. I can think of many times, especially me, I was the instigator and I could get all my siblings laughing. Obviously when the preacher's preaching, it's quiet and my dad would turn around and I could put on a stone cold straight face. Like it wasn't me. And I'd point to my siblings, it's them. And they'd get their phones taken after service. And we'd get a thump on the head. So, but that translates, to when I went off to college. Admittedly, it wasn't important for me, my freshman summer, to go to college. It was my first time away from home. I figured, look, I already had the foundation. I don't have to. Sundays are one day off from swimming. It's the day I want to sleep in. I don't have to go to church. But then I'm so grateful for the community that I found at Kentucky, whether it was my friends, my roommates, my husband, who was my boyfriend at the time. We just held each other accountable, and we started getting involved and going to the youth groups and getting involved in different mentorship programs and whatever it was. But I think you almost have to be tested in that way, in a personal way, where you don't have your parents who kind of guide you to really, understand the true value and meaning of the Lord and his grace and his goodness. So,
amen. What about you, Brad?
Well, look, my thing is, and I always stress to them, and I tell them now, even when she goes on a flight to speak to somebody or speak to a group or advocate for something, I still tell them, hey, be an example, be a good example. You can always touch somebody because, look, humbly, I say this, we were all successful athletically. And I say that with total humility, And with that comes, Ken, you know this, and all, you guys know this, that people look to athletes in a different regard. They just do. And if you're successful, in a little more of a higher regard. Now, so that's the first part, is people are always looking at you. And so you have an opportunity to either be a good influence or a bad influence. You have a choice. And so it's always been important to me. The one thing when I was a kid, is that I never wanted to do was embarrass my parents, period. That was important to me.
Yeah.
And of course, look, we were all, it was a bunch of boys in my family, and we did a lot of crazy, stupid, bad stuff that I'll tell you guys on the phone, but I don't want her to hear, because from what she's heard from me, I made straight A's. I played in
She's not
the
believing
rock
that.
That sounds just like my dad. He
Yeah.
rosies it up a little bit.
I told him I played in Kiss forever. You couldn't tell, because I had the one with the makeup on. And so you set those examples. And like I said, even today, I tell her, hey, people are watching. No matter what it is, always hold yourself in higher regard. That's my thing. Always. And I don't mean this in a cocky or I mean it in, hold yourself in a higher regard. Think that you are, not that you are better than somebody, because I tell them, you're no better than that person that's going to clean the toilet at Waffle House tonight. You're not. But you can hold yourself in a higher regard, and always consider yourself a leader. Be that leader on the team, because people look to that for guidance.
Now,
Riley, we all have moments in our lives. We all could point back to probably one to two or three of them. Take us, if you wouldn't mind, Brad. Take us back. I alluded to it in the intro. Take us back to October 1989 at Ole Miss, and Riley, take us back to March of 22 at the NCAA championships. And both of these moments have changed your lives in many ways. And I'd like the other one of you to talk a little bit about how you have seen it change your dad, or you've seen it change Riley's life with what you're going through.
Well, for me, obviously, that day in October in Oxford, Mississippi, I was a junior. I was a running back. I was number one in the SEC in several categories. We threw the ball. Well, you played for Mac Brown, Ken, and Watson was our coach. So, we threw the ball all over the place. And, man, I was just having a tremendous year. And then the accident with Chucky happens. And, man, it was, for me, I have two brothers that are playing on Sundays at the time, and I know that's where it was. I knew that's where I was going to be. And when that happened, it was just like, and Ken, I firmly believe that the Lord puts people in places where he needs them. And he said, hey, this is, I need you to be this voice or this mouthpiece. I need this to happen to you. And the more, as I get older, I look back and I'm thankful that it was me, if that in a weird kind of way. Look, accidents are going to happen. I still struggle with the guilt. I always will. But I know that, look, it wasn't my fault, but it's that association and the change that it had on me, the change that it had on a university, the change that it had on the state of Mississippi, which has that connotation, of being the racist state and all that from the past, and in the South and across America. And it took me a long, long, long time, and I still go to the grave several times a year. But that's just something that I do. It helps me, and it's just something that I have chose to do. I don't do it for anybody else. I do it for me and for Chucky. And I knew that that the Lord picked me for that day. And it's so funny, and I'll let Riley allude to this. And when all this happened with her, uh, again, she's a 12-time All-American, and she was having just this crazy, phenomenal year. And then something like this happens. And the night I was in Atlanta when all this went down, and we're talking, and I told her, "Hey, the Lord, He chose you. What better mouthpiece for this than her? Because this was not by design. This was what happened to me, what happened to her. It is by the Lord's blessing, I guess. So I'm going to let Riley allude to her situation."
Yeah. So I went to the University of Kentucky. As my dad said, had a pretty good career. Things that I'll really forever be proud of: being a 12-time All-American, 5-time SEC champion, the SEC record holder in the 200 butterfly, making me one of the fastest Americans of all time. 2-time Olympic trial qualifier, SEC Scholar Athlete of the Year, SEC Community Service Leader of the Year. The list goes on, but again, just to reiterate it, it's of course a lifelong journey. And so I'll flash forward to my junior year. This was the year we dealt with COVID, right? All of the pretty nonsensical mask mandates, which is pretty funny in a sport where you're in the water. We literally waterboarded ourselves every day. Whether it was the push for the vaccine, whatever it was, this was a year filled with hardships. We'll just put it that way. But I ended up concluding my junior season by placing 7th in the nation. And so it was really right then and there, placing 7th, that I set a goal for my senior year to win a national title, which would of course mean becoming the fastest woman in the country in my respective event. And so, senior year rolls around. I'm right on pace to achieve this goal until about 3 weeks or so before our national championships, when the NCAA released a statement saying that a swimmer who went by the name of Leah Thomas would be competing in the women's category. Of course, the controversy here is that Leah Thomas is actually Will Thomas, and swam 3 years on the men's team at University of Pennsylvania before deciding to switch to the women's team in his senior year. As you could probably imagine, this was a mediocre male swimmer. Again, still at the Division I level, but mediocre within D1 men's swimming, ranking in the 400s and 500s nationally. To, again, not even 12 months later, dominating the entire country of women. And so everyone saw the problem with this. Me, my teammates, my coaches, my athletic director, everyone saw the harm that was being done and the absurdity of this. But no one felt felt comfortable enough to say it out loud. And I'll get into that in a minute. But really, what thrusted me over the edge into, I guess, taking that initial leap of faith and using my voice, I watched him win a national title the first day, again, beating Olympians, beating American record holders, the most impressive female swimmers this world has ever seen. And he beat them all by body lengths in the 500 freestyle. But the next day of competition was the 200 free, which is the event that he and I race each other in. And so, you get on the blocks, and I look over at the lane next to me, and it's very obviously a male, right? Standing about 8-9 inches taller than me at 6'4". His size 15 feet take up the entire diving block. Visible from his side profile is an obvious Adam's apple, not to mention like the bulge in his women's swimsuit. It was very obviously a male. But nonetheless, we dove off. We swam 8 laps of freestyle, touched the wall at the end. And I look up at the scoreboard behind me, and almost impossibly enough, we had gone the exact same time, down to the 100th of a second, meaning, of course, that we had tied, which is really rare in a sport where, again, you're racing down to the 100th of a second, not even 1/100th separated us. Which, again, when you're racing for 1 minute and 40 seconds, it doesn't happen that often. And so,
That's kind of one of the things that I say that, man, that's intervention there. That's intervention, and there are things littered all throughout her story and my story. In Russellville, Alabama, where Chucky Mullins is from, it's crazy, Ken, Austin. Mullins Avenue cross sections with Gaines Avenue. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And the same thing with her. And I told her that if we're speaking on the faith level, man, this is how the Lord works. I mean, it's things like that. And I'm not getting hooky or kooky or anything, but stuff like that happens. And I firmly believe that she was chosen. She was chosen for that. He said, "Hey," and I'll let her tell you about what her plans were. But the Lord at that time said, "Hey, you're not in charge of your plans. I am." And he used her, as that conduit.
it really was. It was providential, but really what thrusted me over the edge, I'm ashamed to say, I think had it just ended there, I don't know if that would have been enough for me to really shift my life plans and kind of take the stand that I did. But what really thrusted me over the edge was after we raced, we go behind the awards podium. Of course, top 8 finishers in the country are marched out. You're given your trophy. You're named an All-American. You stand atop the podium. So we go back there, and the NCAA official looks at both, again, Thomas and myself, him towering over me. And this official says, "Great job, you two, but you tied. And we only have 1 trophy. We don't account for ties. So we're going to give that trophy to Leah. Sorry, Riley, you just don't get one. You have to go home empty-handed." And of course, I was so taken aback by this. And so I asked the dreaded question that no one dared ask all season of why. Why are you giving the trophy to the man in the women's 200 free?
Yeah.
He answered honestly, transparently, and with sadness on his face. I could tell he didn't even believe what he was about to say. But this official said, "Riley, I'm so sorry, but we have been advised as an organization, as the NCAA, that when photos are being taken, it's crucial that the trophy's in Leah's hands. So you can pose with this one, but you have to give yours back." And that was kind of, you mentioned that pivotal point. Yeah. I remember distinctly standing on that podium, holding this trophy I knew I have to give back, sharing my placement with this man, again, 8-9 inches taller than me. And it was just this realization of I was waiting for so long for someone else to say something, but it was at that point where I realized, how in the world, Riley, can you expect someone to stand up for you if you're not even willing to stand up for yourself? So that was that first pivotal point for me.
Brad, how hard is it to watch your daughter go through this?
Well, so they were down there. I don't know. Say the meet's in Atlanta.
Was it Georgia Tech?
And so she calls me on, say, Wednesday or Thursday, and she's like, "Dad, there is a dude in our locker room." And I'm like, "He's in your locker room?" And she's like, "Yes, he's changing. He is a real dude." And I'm like, and I'm just thinking, how, of course, I want to drive down there and take care of it myself. And she's like, "Dad, don't come down here. Just wait till I race and everything." And Ken, when she says that looks beside her, and I would tell you, he is a legitimate 6'4". I mean, it was
like a South Park episode.
It was a man up there, and I'm just like, is this really happening in the crowd?
But everything down to his dive off the block, his stroke rate, I mean, he stuck out like a sore thumb. Besides the very obvious physical differences, his stroke was entirely different. I mean, everything about how he swam compared to the girls who swam in the lanes next to him, it was, you don't have to be a swimmer to recognize this person is very different than the rest. And yeah, the locker room piece, I mean, that was just that. I just remember feeling so betrayed. I felt so betrayed by our universities, by the NCAA, by our administrations, who, of course, always touted that they had our best interests, that they would do everything in their power to protect us. But I mean, our rights to privacy in that area of undressing, where this man, inches away from where we were simultaneously fully undressed, was exposing himself fully intact, fully naked. I just felt it's humiliating, it's awkward, it's embarrassing, it's uncomfortable. It was feelings of utter violation and total betrayal. And that's how, again, all of us felt in that locker room.
Well, and she had said some of the girls, and again, these are the fastest swimmers in the country.
In the world. Other countries come to the U.S., of course, to swim. It's the fastest in the world.
And she said, Dad, some of these girls are changing in the mop closet. Wow. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. This is the NCAA championships, and they're letting this happen. It is just it's the craziest thing. And I think that at that period, you know, those early 2020s, 2021, 22, 2023, as a nation, it was kind of goofy. It was, we lost, you
really goofy.
You lose the country lost the moral compass kind of in a way. And you had all this wokeness starting up, and you had this and look, I'm conservative, and you have to, again, it goes back to leadership. And I'm not gooning on Joe Biden, but I am, or that whole administration and that whole.
I mean, Charlie Baker himself, which at the time it was NCAA president, was Mark Emmert. I mean, total cowards. I had a conversation with him where he would privately tell me, you know, you keep pushing, you keep fighting, as if he's not the one I'm fighting, and then publicly released statements saying he unequivocally stood in his decision to allow Leah Thomas to swim with the women because it was based in evolving science. So I think there was just this period, and even still, I think we're you mentioned it in your intro, Ken, like this return or fight for common sense. I do believe that we are certainly seeing a shift back to normalcy, but there was a blip of time, and even partially still, where people lost their backbones. They knew what the right thing was. They just weren't willing to do it.
Well, you look, you've seen that your whole career, right? I mean, it's you see that in everyday stuff. And man, again, give me a fighter. I'll take a fighter if once. And I've always told my kids this as a parenting cue is, once you lose your conscience, it's over.
Yeah.
It's over. Once you lose your conscience, it's over. That means, look, if a thief, if you're scared to steal a pack of bubble gum from Walmart and your friends talk you into doing that first time, the next time you're stealing a gold chain, and then the next time you're stealing money from somebody, and the next time you're stealing a car and it doesn't bother you. Same thing is, you look, if you somebody that's cheating on their wife, the first, and you said, man, I'd never do it, I'd never do it, and you do it that first time, the next time's easier. So once you lose your conscience, man, it's tough. It's tough. So I've always been proud with all my kids that they've made right and straight decisions. Sometimes they haven't. Lord knows I've made a ton of crooked decisions. But if you stay on that path, you know, and you know where you're at, and you keep your conscience, and it bothers you. Look, does it bother you when you do something that you know you're not supposed to do? if it doesn't bother you, it's tough to get back on the trail. So,
Hey guys, I hope you're enjoying the podcast today. Austin, I would like to thank each of you for taking time out of your week to listen to our podcast, Awaken Kingdom Culture. This past year has been truly amazing. The conversations that Austin and I have been able to share as a father and son, the new relationships that we have made throughout this past year, and the ability to share other people's stories have been life-changing. Each week, I continue to be reminded of the value and impact one story can have. As a listener-supported podcast, I'm grateful for all of you who have partnered with us this past year. If this podcast has spoken to your heart and you'd like to see it continue to awaken other hearts and minds, then I'd like to invite you to become a teammate. If you'd like to partner with Win Awakening, as well as our podcast, you can give at winawakening.org. And please spread the word about our ministry to all of your friends. Don't forget to follow, like, and subscribe to Awaken Kingdom Culture, Spotify, and YouTube channels. To listen to and watch our podcast weekly, every Wednesday at 9 a.m. Eastern. If you'd like to follow my socials as well and hear about the upcoming podcast news, watch the latest clips, and get an inside look at my life behind the scenes, then follow Ken Karcher on Facebook and X and KP Karcher on Instagram. I encourage you to subscribe to our mailing list and to partner with us as we continue to awaken hearts and minds one story at a time. Now, let's get back to the podcast.
Dad, do you want to jump ahead to legacy?
Yeah, as both of you have gone through these different moments in your life, when it's just you and, I call him Papa, you and Papa alone, what do you hear in your spirit?
I try and think of, you mentioned the word legacy, right? What I want to leave behind, and kind of what those quiet conversations look like, and how I want to portray myself, not just, I guess, on social media or whatever in a super superficial way, but what people think about me. And of course, before anything, it's to live a Christ-like life, which I will say, it's hard. It's hard, especially on this topic where I know we have a Lord who loves everybody, regardless of who you are, regardless of what you've done. He loves everybody just the same. But I also know we have a Lord a creator who doesn't make mistakes, who hates sin. And so, of course, I try and approach this topic in particular with grace, but that's something I struggle with. I can think of many stories in the Bible where, Jesus displays, of course, that perfect image and visual of grace, which is what our society, our culture, that's what they're quick to talk about, God's grace, right? You think of any progressive pastor, that's always what they speak of. But what they leave out, what the He Gets Us commercial at the Super Bowl leaves out, right? It depicts these Christ-like figures washing the feet of sinners outside Planned Parenthoods or abortion clinics, whatever it is. Again, that's biblically accurate. But what they left out is what happens next in the story. I think of stories like 1 John, right? The adulterous woman who's sentenced to be stoned. And the soldiers appear, they're ready to throw, and Jesus shows up and he says, "Those without sin cast the first stone." And that's, of course, his perfect display of grace. But again, what culture leaves out, what the progressive pastor leaves out, is what happens next. And Jesus then says, "Now go and sin no more." And that is him always leading with grace, but always landing with the truth. And so in my daily conversations, my daily prayer, I always ask for him to instill in me that Christ-like grace, because admittedly, it's not overly natural for me to approach this conversation with that same sense of empathy or compassion or understanding that the Lord has. It's to me, this topic, the issue of male, female, how they are created uniquely and intentionally in his perfect image, very differently from one another, created equal, but different. It's common sense. It's entry level. It's basic biology. It's of course, I mean, it's biological reality, but it's biblical truth as well. And so it's hard for me to approach this in a way that isn't very, stern. So I think, I mean, what those conversations in my quiet time look like, I ask for strength. I ask for wisdom. I ask for protection. That's a big thing, because I have found myself in several situations now where often violent situations, to be real with you, where people who are on the opposing side of this issue, I've had drinks poured on me, glass bottles thrown at me. I've been spit on. I've been physically attacked. I've been held for ransom in San Francisco for 5 hours to the middle of the night. So I always ask for protection. That's another big thing.
Brad, how about you? What are you hearing in your spirit when you think back to your situation, or even now your daughter Riley?
Well, look, as a parent, you want your legacy to be, for me, is how do your kids turn out? And then I think that look, we're commanded as parents, and one day she'll know this, and our oldest daughter, she just has a new one. And so we're commanded as parents to, I'll just kind of paraphrase, but to show them the way, right? And like she said earlier, there are times on Sunday afternoon and you're watching a game, the second game, and it's 6:00 and it's tied 14-14, but you got to go to church. Man, hey, there are times that, golly, I really don't want to go, right? But
Right.
as a parent, you do it. And because you show your kids, this is what we're doing. On Wednesday night, we're going to church. On Sunday night, we're going to church. And you put those inconveniences away. Does it inconvenience you? That's the thing to me is, are you inconvenienced? Look, the Lord was inconvenient every day, several times a day. And if he is human, sometimes those things, he probably got tired at times of walking down the path, and people coming up to him all the time. Can you heal my kid? Can you heal my brother? Can you do this? Can you do this? We hear you can do miracles. Can you do this? Can you do this? And look, that's tough. But in this world, there are two kinds of people to me. You are either a giver or you are a taker. And we know plenty of people that are takers. You know them in your daily life. Maybe some of your friends, maybe some of my friends. There are people that think of themselves first. And it is to me the best quality that a person can have is selflessness. And that is just putting others before yourself. Always put yourself last. And then I think that you find happiness out of that. You find gratitude out of that. There's nothing more that I like than if me and Riley go to lunch with Ken and Austin and I buy the lunch because I want to, and that makes me feel good. And there are people that that if it's just you and him and there's one piece of pizza left out there, he's going to take it. So it's just it's two ways. You're a giver or a taker. And I think that you find true happiness if you put others before yourself.
Austin, I'm going to go to final word.
What has been the most significant thing you have learned from watching each other live out your faith?
Well, I really do just have such a great example. And I know that's a rarity in today's world. I mean, I compare the relationship that my family has to that of my friends or my roommate or whoever it was, and it's entirely different, right? It's not the same as it was 50 years ago. So I've just got a great example. I've got two parents I can look up to, and I use that in both what to do and what not to do. Right,
Yeah,
Dad?
absolutely. Hey, I made mistakes.
Absolutely.
But that's what you do. And so, and my siblings, I'm so fortunate we're all so close, whether it's, I mean, me and my little sister, like you said, we work out every morning together. She texted me today, can we go work out? She spends the night at my house all the time. My brother, he's calling me every day. My oldest sister, and now her baby, my nephew. It's just the best thing ever. I'm so grateful for the family that I have and to have leaders in my life like them.
Well, and Kent also that's what I tell them is I'm blessed that I've got all these brothers and we all talk several times a day. I mean, me and Chris have already talked about when I got out of church this morning, what are you gonna eat for lunch? What sandwich you gonna get? Golly, I hope Florida beats Tennessee today. And it's just, and that's awesome. And there are so many examples of families that are disjointed over something stupid. It could be money, it could be this, and I can't. It was important for my parents that we stay tight, and I tell them as well. And I love it now that Riley has a national presence. And I love it when our younger one, our 10th grader, when Riley's in town, that she spends time with her, that she can see how Riley acts and how she lives and different things like that. Because it's again, it goes back to, and I tell Riley, look, this is your little sister. She looks up to you. Just like I looked up to my brothers, and you can be that influence on her because you guys, you know how school systems are now, that how tough it is. It's not like it was 20, 30 years ago. So, it's kind of neat.
Well, we always end our session with something we call final words. And Brad, let's start with you. I also always say words of life because we speak life to each other. What's something, Brad, you'd want to share with Riley as we close our time? And Riley, something back to Dad, and then Austin will say something, and I'll wrap it up.
Well, I think to Riley that, hey, at some point she's going to have a family, and your show is kind of geared around family, and it to me it's important to always put those in your family first, again, before yourself, and to raise them in that manner, in that Christ-like manner, and to always show them example. Look, they've never seen alcohol in my refrigerator. They've never heard a bad word come out of my mouth. Now, hey, I've said some bad words before. I may or I may not have had a drink before, but they'll never see that because that was important to me to show them that right way. And hopefully I have done a pretty good job. And I think that's how are you judged as a parent? And I think you can look at your kids and see, if a kid is from a loving home, from a Christian home, you see that. And there are so many kids today at school, man. That's why it's important for a coach to, and Ken, you guys know this, that on a football team, there's 60 kids, there's 60 different personalities. Nobody is the same. And some kids you got to lean on a little bit to get them to perform. Some kids you don't have to say diddly squat to. They're going to play hard every play. And so, but there are some kids you have no idea what they're going through at home. And you could be that only person that gives them comfort, that gives them strength, that gives them love, that they see the whole day. So it's important as a coach to be that leader. And it's kind of like you are a parent. So that's what I'm going to end with.
And I'll just say it's cool to do a podcast in this format. Of course, I've been on my fair share of podcasts now, ranging from Joe Rogan, Megan Kelly, Jordan Peterson. I mean, you name it, I've probably done it.
But you hadn't been on the Ken Karcher.
No. This type of format, it just means a lot. So my message to you, Dad, I feel indebted to you. Of course, you were able to provide and do everything that me and my siblings needed when we were younger. But even still, as a 24-year-old woman who's happily married, I'm a homeowner. We're doing our own thing. I mean, I talk to my dad 10 times a day. The other day in the airport, I'm calling him, whether it's political advice, asking about tariffs. I'm like, can you help me understand this whole tariff thing? I teach me this in school. Whatever it is, you're my dad, of course, but as I've grown older, you've just become my friend. So this is really cool.
Hey, I tell them, if you be a parent first and foremost, you be a parent, and that is the encouragement, that is the discipline. Discipline's tough at times, right? But you have to discipline. I'm a firm believer in discipline. And if you're a parent first, the friendship comes with it, 100%. 100%. And so that's kind of neat. And like you say, we talk several times every day because I'm concerned about her. I'm concerned about her safety. I'm concerned about everything that she does. And I'll always finish my text that how much I'm proud of.
Awesome. Well, I do a lot of listening as I listen to these podcasts and just as I hear y'all's stories. And first off, I appreciate you guys taking the time to share y'all's hearts and your story with us. For me, the thing that God spoke to my heart as I listened to y'all is the story of Esther and the story of she understood where she fit in time and place and her role. Both of you had moments almost coming down to 1 second instances that, change your life. And your perspective, both of y'all, on your purpose and that, God has equipped me for a unique and intentional moment in time that will affect the rest of my life, and using that to point people to Him, and help speak truth in, what can be a very dark world at times. And, obviously I've watched your ESPN thing before, like, I don't even remember 10 years ago. I hadn't, obviously, Riley, I've seen some stuff on you just recently, but I didn't make the connection between, the Chucky story and him getting paralyzed. And, I watched you go to his grave and just, just seeing your heart and both you using what has happened in your life to ultimately make Him known. That's really what our heart is with this ministry, and this podcast is Awaken Kingdom Culture. It's to, you have a story, I have a story, he has a story. They don't all look the same, but when we submit to Papa's will for our lives, each of us, and we go into our pockets of our world and we carry His kingdom into it, that's where the culture changes. And I know, Riley, that's a big part of what you're doing. And, your bravery and your courage is something that, doesn't go unnoticed. I couldn't imagine being a dad, and I have 3 daughters that, having to watch her work through some of this stuff and just trusting that God will protect and provide in each and every situation. But you guys are walking out what I believe is, your calling, and you guys see it. And you're revealing Papa in it. So I thank you for what you do. and your willingness to take time to spend with us today.
Well, we appreciate you guys and spreading the word, spreading the gospel, highlighting the stories that you do and in the format you do.
Well, it's awesome that, you guys, Ken, you've obviously done a great job with Austin. So, I appreciate that as well.
Well, once again, I just want to say thank you. I don't take it lightly. Riley, I know what your schedule's like, just talking to your dad, and then the two of you being willing to take some time to share your heart. We much appreciate that. When I think of the two of you, I think of the picture of compassion, Brad, that you have shown from the time that you've gone through your moment. And Riley, the courage, as my son said, is amazing. As I have two daughters, very athletic. I have 4 grandchildren, 4 granddaughters. And so I thank you for standing up for women because that means a lot to the whole country and world. And so the courage it takes is something special. So, Austin, I just thank you for allowing us to share your story with our listeners today at Awaken Kingdom Culture, where hearts and minds come alive, one story at a time.